Right. Hello there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Healing Conversation. My name is Einav from Untangled Coaching, and with me today, Julianne Williams. Hi, Julianne.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you. I'm so happy that you're here. Tell us a little bit about you and the conversation that we're about to have.
Okay, well, my name is Julianne Williams. I am an author and speaker, and really trying to pursue my mission of sharing about mental health awareness and grief recovery. So that is what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share a little bit about my personal journey through grief.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right. So, I'm going to start first because the title of the talk was, building your life after the suicide of a loved one. And so that's what I'm going to share with you today. I had the terrible experience of losing my husband 17 years ago to suicide. And it's been quite a journey rebuilding my life, but into a life that truly I love and I'm happy and content. The hardest part, I think, about suicide and what the message I really want to give everyone is there was nothing you could have done. There's nothing you could have done different. It's not your fault. It was not your choice. I had people come to me afterwards. One particular woman come to me uh, the day that I had found out about my husband taking his life, who came to me in my own bedroom and said, "You should have never left him alone." Well, she didn't know the whole journey, obviously, that we had been through. But in that moment, for someone to come and say, "You should have never left him alone," you knew he was capable of this. It was just a very unkind thing for her to say to me. But it really my guilt welled up after that, because then I kept looking back at that morning, the day before, actually 3 days before. And, I now recognize that there was nothing I could have done different. He had already made his decision. So those of you that are struggling, thinking that things could have been different or there was something that you could have done, I am here to tell you that I know you did all you could. And I just want to rest with you in that thought, and talk a little bit about the story if that's where we're ready to go now.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more presentation style with all of you because it's a heavy topic and it's easier, I think, emotionally on all of us when we do a little bit like this. But I'm going to talk. I was standing there, knowing that he wasn't there, and I realized it was the last time I would ever physically see him, and he was there laying in his casket, and I was in church, and my parents were around me and my children, and they literally had to drag me away so that we could go to the cemetery. I could not separate. I couldn't imagine again never seeing him physically. Honestly, my life had really changed forever the minute he disappeared 3 days before they found him. And it had just been a little bit over a week. And he was 38, I was 36, and we had two little kids, and they were 7 and 3. And in those moments, I honestly didn't think I was going to be able to survive. And so many of you might have felt that way after finding out about the death and the choice of someone to take their life, of someone that you love. I had already had a lot of challenges in my life. I was born with a literally life-threatening heart defect, and I had to have open heart surgery when I was 5. And, that had a bunch of challenges as a small child. And then I was diagnosed with other medical conditions through my life. And when I look back at all of those things that I had to overcome, I realized, where I was with the death of my husband really, really um, helped. All those things helped me build what I needed, which was that resilience to be able to rebuild my life. Because in common, my medical problems, because they told me I'd never be able to have children, I would never be able to exercise vigorously, I would never, all of the things that I could not do. But I always found a way, and with wisdom of physicians and so on. So I don't advise people to do things that are not good for you. But
Yeah.
I always wanted to find a way to do as much as I could. The same with trying to rebuild my life. I wanted it to be as good as it could, even though it was going to be different than I planned. So in common of all these things was sorrow, isolation, and honestly feeling like I was damaged because I had all these health things, and then I had this person who decided to leave me and my kids. And so I don't know if any of you feel that way, but I wanted to share a little bit of that backstory so that, first of all, you understand that I have been through what you have been through. And while I can't feel your feelings, I want you to know that you're not alone, because that was one thing that was really big for me. But I also, wanted you to know that I have always fought for my life, either physically or emotionally. I have had to fight. And I want to tell you that resiliency isn't learned through the easy things, it's learned through difficulty, and that you can make it. So if we think about what resilience is, because for me, I like to know what it is I'm working towards. And that is, it's the capability of a strained body to overcome, and recover its size and shape after like a compressed stress. And when you lose someone to suicide, I think it's one of the most stressful situations that you can be in. And so, when I was wanting to build resiliency, I didn't have a coach. I did go to therapy, which was very, very helpful. But really what I had to do is sit back and say, what can I do? And how can I do this? Not just how do I feel, because we all know those stages of grief, but what should I do? Because there was a moment that I actually had my children in the car. I wanted to go see where he killed himself, because it was in the mountains. And I had my kids in the car, and I actually almost drove us off a cliff because I was so depressed myself. And so that's when I really had to sit back, when I literally stopped my car and said, okay, I can't live like this. How do I get out of this? And like I said, I didn't have a coach. I had a therapist, but there was nobody who really understood what I was going through. So, I decided to, take some decisive effort and to figure out how to rebuild my life. And so I have my little acronym because I live by those. It's easier for me to remember things. And it's really what it is. And, for me, I'm a faithful person. I'm a Christian. And so the first thing I had to do is thank God for all the blessings that I did have, so that I could start thinking about what was good. And then, I had to reflect on what do you do to not just survive, but thrive. And so my little acronym is my word, which is hope, because hope, other than love, hope is probably for me the second most important thing. And so H is heed, and heed really is, you have to learn to pay attention to your feelings. Unfortunately, for us to heal, we have to feel before we can release. And the feeling part is no fun, right? At least it wasn't for me. I've never cried more tears than I did during, probably the last 17 years, but especially that first 5 years. But we have to acknowledge what we need. And when we're grieving, sometimes it's hard to ascertain what it is that we need. And that's why you literally have to stop and just feel and give yourself permission to hear the voice, your small voice. It says, these are the things that I need, because you do have to take care of yourself. And, I think as I've gone through my healing journey, it is that small voice. It's that feeling in my stomach. It's just that intuition. So those emotions and those physical sensations can tell you a lot about what you need. But most importantly, you have to take the time. The other thing is, during grief, and H being heed, which is stop. I just encourage people not to make really big decisions during that first year. Right? I mean, sometimes we make them and we think we're doing the right thing. And then later on, I know I made a couple of decisions that I wish I would not have made. And so I do I mean, obviously sometimes we're forced to make some decisions, but if it's something that's not, critical at the time, I would encourage you to stop, and, maybe don't move, don't buy a car, don't throw away things that were meaningful to your loved one, their clothes, unless, again, that is what you need. But I just encourage everybody to just pause, listen, consult with people that you love and that love you and have your best interest at heart before you make big decisions. Because again, we come back and sometimes we're kind of, sorry, and we can't repair that. So one thing that I did that I semi regret, for instance, is I had my wedding ring made into a pendant because I thought it'd be better. I could wear it all the time. And now I'm kind of sorry because I really wish I had my wedding ring the way it was. And that sometimes really bothers me. And other times I'm glad because I'm wearing my pendant and he's right here. So, that was a big decision that I wish I would not have made. And I know it's a thing and a piece of jewelry, but I that's one thing that I do regret. And there are others, but that's a one that, definitely wanted to bring up. The O really is for opportunity. And that is, no matter what, you have an opportunity for things to change. That, opportunity means there's a chance that things will change. And I can tell you right now, no matter where we are in our life, it always changes. And, I think when we're grieving, we don't think anything else is possible. We think that this is the end of the road, that there's nowhere else to go, that we're just trapped in these circumstances of sorrow and guilt and remorse and whatever it is that is in your heart. And, I hope that just knowing that things will change is encouraging, because the rawness that you have in your grief is going to lift. It will. We're designed like that, and it will lift. And what that means is you can know in every area of your life that something will change. Either you'll find happiness again in a different way. If your grief isn't around losing someone and it's just wanting, maybe you've lost your job and that was everything to you. There's a job. You will find one. That will change. If we desire a certain outcome, we can get it. A new relationship will come if you were divorced and you're yearning for another marriage. And so I just know that the opportunity being knowing something will always morph and be different, to me, gives me hope. And but we have to do things. So we'll get to that with the E. But, I heard in church one time, my pastor said, if you do want to find a relationship, you can't sit in your house. God doesn't necessarily, there are times when people meet people by happenstance, someone knocking on their door, but it's probably not going to happen all the time. So, as we think of that opportunity, we also have to think of what our part is in creating that. And so so again, when you sit and think, those are some of the small voices that you need to listen to. And then P, which is purpose. And that is that, we are all here for a reason. And God made each one of us in his own image, and he made us to be us for a reason. And even when things are tough, we can still contribute to those around us. We can, still bring something to the world. And so, I would just ask you to acknowledge that your value is just you being here. You're valuable because you were created and you live. And just by being you have significance, and you can heal. And, I don't always want to get too much into religion with people because I don't want people to be turned off. But I do think of a verse a lot when I think about purpose, and that is Ephesians 2:10. And it says that we're God's handiwork, and he created us to do good things. And he prepared us in advance for the things that we are supposed to do. And so whatever it is that is your purpose, you've already been prepared for. And this hard time, unfortunately, sometimes is a time of preparation for some of those things, only because he takes things that are bad and makes them good. He already knew that you were going to have this happen. And so he has prepared you. Just like I said in the beginning, through all of my medical problems and all of those things that I went through, it prepared me for what I've had to overcome this last 17 years.
Mm.
And so you are well prepared, and your life is a deliberate action of God. And I hope that gives you comfort, because it does me, knowing that I just because my husband decided to take his life, that doesn't mean that I am less. It doesn't mean that my children are less. It doesn't mean that my life has no meaning. But I felt that way for a while.
Yeah.
And, it's because you feel like you weren't good enough. And we know that we are, just by being us. And then last is E, which is the execution. And that is, we do have to do things. And taking those first steps sometimes are really hard. So I just encourage you, for instance, one thing that I couldn't sleep at night, but I also couldn't get up in the morning, after my husband passed. So then I had to start kind of setting my alarm for like 10 minutes earlier every few days to try to get myself up and going and get things, take care of my children. I had to go back to work. I had to, all of those things. So whatever it is, you have to do something for the change that you desire to happen. Because I had a boss that used to say, indecision is worse than death. And he's correct, because when we don't make a decision will be made around us and
Yeah.
for us, and it may not be what we want. So, I even do things like put reminders on my phone, so that if there was something that I knew I needed to do, I mean, I still do that. It reminds me, oh, I must do that. I think you can make a simple checklist. We all have different ways that we are able to see our progress. But the one thing that I will tell you is, even though sometimes it feels like we go backwards, if you look back, you see the line really goes like this. It may have little things in there, but you always grow when you want to grow. So, in the end, what I feel about rebuilding my life is, I know I had to make the choice to do things that were necessary to renew my spirit. And those are some, that hope is the thing that I think about. Okay, did I stop and think about this? What is my opportunity? Where's my purpose? What do I need to do? And that's what I do with that acronym. Um, and then again, I mean, you have to feel every emotion, and that part's no fun. But when you don't feel it, you don't release it, and it stays with you. And then as other things happen, it gets harder and harder to confront that. So I encourage you, in the safety of someone that you love or by yourself, whatever it is, to do that. And really, if you have people in your life, surround yourself with them and grieve with them. And if you're supporting someone who has lost someone from suicide, all I can say is, you don't have to fix. You just got to be, just sit, even if that person is just crying, and let them cry and let them feel, but just give them support. And then obviously my faith is something that's so important to me. And I explained why, because I had to know that I had a purpose. And I know that this is part of my purpose, sharing my story, letting people know they're not the only one. Hopefully, people seeing that you can get through it. And then, the last thing I kind of do is, like, I developed some hobbies. I learned how to play bass guitar, which I play very badly, and I haven't played in a while because I've been busy. But, I found a few things to do to not to distract me from what I felt, but to give me something new to focus on. And so, I picked up a few hobbies, and then, of course, just continued to do things like run half marathons, because for some reason that cleared my mind. But, I hope that, at least to start, and then any questions, that you have, that's sort of how I have been rebuilding my life, and it's still a daily job. You never kind of guess where you want to be in the end, but I know that I have been able to get over the rawness of that grief. Doesn't mean I don't miss them. Doesn't mean I don't wish it was different, but I have been able to find a path, of healing, and raised my children, who have turned out very nicely. They're very, very nice young adults. They're now 25 and 20. And, it's not been perfect. but it's been good.
And I really want to thank you for sharing everything that you had. It's when we spoke about it before. For me, it's as soon as we talk about death, yes, but suicide more so. It brings something very raw in me that is really, I don't really know why, but I definitely feel it whenever we talk about suicide. And so I really want to thank you for sharing it, because I think really it's so important that we have to talk about these things. We have to acknowledge that sometimes you die naturally and sometimes you don't, and whatever it is, there's still a conversation to be had. And yes, as we spoke before about, it's a conversation about you as, or the person who is going through that, but also the people who stay behind and have to
Mhm.
deal with the loss, but also with all the questions and all the, I think, like you said earlier, about the guilt, but also about the questioning of yourself, right? Could I have done something differently? Was it actually even, I don't want to say my job to do something, but could I have done, is it for me to do? Is it really their path? And I have to respect that this is, their path. And also, I guess, also acknowledging that we are not really ever aware of the bigger picture and the bigger reason why things are happening the way that they are. And so I think it's really important to bring that conversation to light, and to, there's really two points here, right? Like we said, the person who is going through the challenges in their lives, and then decide that this is the one way to move forward, in a sense. And also the people behind. And it's a lot of conversations, and they're not easy necessarily, but also I really, of course, like what you're describing about how you found your way of moving forward. And there needed to be a choice that, like, actually I can't just sink, because it's so easy in a sense to sink. And having that courage to say, I don't, I'm choosing not to continue down that path, because I think also, I lost people in my life, and sometimes we do also feel guilty about, being happy when they're not with us, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And so making this decision that actually it's okay to be happy, it's okay to continue, not by forgetting, but actually just, as you said, recognizing that you have your own path in this life, which is separate and different, of course, to the one of your husband's.
Mhm. And I think mental health, we haven't done a good job. I mean, I'm in the United States. We have done a terrible job with mental health here.
Mm.
Um, and it has such a stigma. And I think a lot of people who are suffering suffer in silence, and then they get to the point where they, do decide to take their own life because they feel alone and isolated, and they don't feel like there is not great help for them. And I know that was part of my husband's struggle, is he knew he was going to have to live with bipolar disorder for the rest of his life after he was, diagnosed about 9 months before he took his life. And he didn't want to do that, but he also couldn't get care that really, really helped him. And I think he became very discouraged. But because we hide mental health, people don't feel comfortable talking about it with people they love. So his family didn't even know. Um, and he suffered, and didn't want to tell anybody why he was experiencing some of the things he was. And until we normalize it, just like any other illness, like cancer or diabetes or whatever, we're going to keep pushing people into these places of isolation when we could actually find ways to help them recover. But for us in the United States, it's a problem with our society. We don't, if you're not perfect, I think you're not, we're not going to spend time with you. You need to figure out your own stuff.
And that's so hard, because obviously when you're feeling in this way, your view is very narrow, right? You really just in that moment, in that feeling of not being able to cope and not knowing what to do. It's yeah, it is really, it's really devastating, especially I think, as the surviving party. It's really hard live with this, because you kind of start going into this, it could have been prevented, and it's really easy to become the victim as well, right? Of looking at society, looking at the health system, and what people are, how what is on offer. I know that in the UK, we have something they call the Samaritans. So people can call anonymously. They don't have to say anything about themselves, but they can call someone and have a conversation when they need. But this is such a small part of the solution. With kids, I know, every time you want to do something, there's so many waiting lists, and waiting times for stuff, and not you can't wait with these things. It's really, you really can't wait, and it is really a really important conversation to have for everyone, as you say, for the people who are going through it, and of course also the families. And it doesn't have to be necessarily that it ends in suicide, of course, because whatever people are going through, we need to find a way to give the support, and not hide it, not be embarrassed or afraid or worried about it. It's a really important conversation.
Well, because, mental health, I mean, it's our body, it's our brain, which is part of our body, and that's why, medications work, because it's a chemical issue for many people, but I think people are very, like you said, it's like you're ashamed because you have bipolar disorder, or, depression, or whatever it is that you're suffering from. And so, you just go into the spiral because we've been told that someone who has a mental health problem is not strong, right? They can't just get themselves out of it. Well, that's really not what it's about. Until we stop labeling people, as, less than or incompetent or whatever, just because they have a mental health problem, we will not allow those people to feel free enough to get the care that they need. So I think, in my mind, I just would encourage everyone. So first of all, if you have problems, get the help. It will change your life. When my husband did get help and he was on his medication and going to therapy, he did very, very well. When he didn't, and he chose not to, he obviously didn't do well. We saw what happened. But it's possible to get treatment and to get better. But, you have to not be embarrassed.
And what about, you, after he was gone, and you
Mhm,
said that you went to therapy, and of course that was helpful for a while at least.
mhm.
What did you notice about conversations that you were having with people? Did you, I mean, I don't know. I know that, of course, when we tell people, oh, this person passed away, then they always want to know how come, what happened, and all of that. But were you made, was it difficult for you to let people know of the circumstances in which he died?
So the police came to my house in the middle of the night to let me know that they had found him. And so, it was like 1 a.m. And I knew that my children, they were asleep. And I knew that they would be getting up in probably 4 or 5 hours. And I felt that I had that period of time to decide exactly what I was going to say.
Mm.
And I went back and forth about it. And then I decided that we were just going to be honest. And part of it is living in a small town. I didn't want some kid to come up to mine and say, I heard your dad did this. And so I wanted to prepare them, but also, I wanted them to understand that there was a mental health issue in our family, and so that they would be actually aware of what they needed. So I was honest from the beginning. Now, with that said, I mean, I didn't put that like in his obituary, but I was honest about it. The thing that I would encourage people is to not ask people how a person who's experienced a loss, how the person died. Because what would happen is, as I was out and about and somebody would say like, oh, are you married? And I'd say, no, I lost my husband. And then they immediately say, how? And so then I
Mm.
would just say, well, he was sick, because that's true.
Yeah.
Just like cancer, he was sick. And then, then it'd be like, well, what did he have? And so then finally I would say, he committed suicide. He took his life by suicide. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. But people would keep probing until they got the answer.
Mm.
But because I try not to like shock people with it either, because people don't know what to say. But yeah, so I was honest about it. I didn't go out and advertise it, but if someone kept asking, then we finally got there.
Yeah.
It was never pretty. And I'm laughing only because, it's those things it's like you either laugh or you cry. So
Yes. Yes. And tell me, you mentioned earlier that when you went to see the place where he died, and you that's the point when you needed to make that decision that actually enough, and now it's time to find a new path for yourself.
mhm.
Can you tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about that moment?
Yeah, I mean, so it was about 5 months after he had died, and, he had gone up to the mountains about an hour and a half or so from our house, and he loved the mountains. It was his place of solace, um, and inspiration, and, I got very curious. I was like, "Okay, I wanted to see what he was looking at. I wanted to see what was the last few minutes," and so I put my kids in the car, and we were driving up, and it's a windy road, and the closer that we got, I was crying more, and I thought, if we're not here, we don't have to be sad. So if I just drive us off that cliff, then we could just be with my husband.
Mm.
And I literally drove off to the side of the road, but then I thought, all of a sudden I thought, oh gosh, what if one of us doesn't die? And so then I was like, "Oh gosh, I can't do that. What if I die and they live? Then they have no parents." And then all of a sudden, it was like a shock of, "What are you doing? Is this how you want the rest of your life to be?" And I actually never made it all the way to where it was that he took his life. Right there, I stopped and said, "I've got to figure my life out. I've got to raise these kids, and I don't want them to have an unhappy life. It's my job to provide an environment for them to have a happy life." And I literally turned the car around and went back home, and they had no
Mhm.
idea where we were going, and got them out of the car, and it was in the evening, and I mean, I cried the whole night, but the next morning I got up and I was like, "Okay, I mean, I'm sad and I don't like this, but I've got to I can't live like this."
Mm.
And it was the moment where I realized I had to go on, even without him.
Yeah. I I feel it. I really feel it. And really thank you for sharing that. And so when was it that you realized that maybe part of your mission was to spread to spread the word and to start helping people to normalize mental health and to be able to talk about suicide, from the person going through it and from the people left behind.
So after I lost my husband, I then sort of became anyone who lost a husband, they'd call and they'd say, "I have a friend who lost a husband." And then I had two friends who lost their husbands. And so I started kind of walking beside people and just, even though the situation of their loss was different, like I had one friend, her husband just died suddenly from a heart attack, 50 years old. Um, and she had two small kids. And so, I just started kind of walking beside people, and I had people say to me, "You need to write a book. Like you've been," and I had a very successful career that helped me financially recover, um, and be able to, give my kids college educations and everything. But it was a lot of sacrifice that we did as a family to do that, but it's worked out. But I just kept being told by people, "You need to write a book. You helped me so much." So that's finally during COVID. I actually was a healthcare provider, but in the time that I was off, I was realizing even through COVID how much more grief there was. So if it wasn't enough of the experience I went through, I just all the death and my health care staff, seeing them grieve. And I thought, you know what? Grief, we've got to talk about grief generally. And then I just felt like it was time to talk about the mental health aspect as well. Because with everything that's happened in the world, and even in the United States, we keep having these terrible shootings. It can make you feel, first of all, you're grieving. And second of all, it can make you feel very depressed. And so I just thought the timing seemed right. I'm at a place where my kids are grown, pretty much out of the house. One of them's totally out. The other one's almost done with college, and he'll be done, and that'll be sad, my little baby. But, but it just seemed like the time for me to do this now. And, so I wrote the book, like I said, and published it last year. And so now I sold my company and decided to live this mission.
That is incredible. I think that's really the purpose that you were talking about, and that is incredible. So what are you noticing now that you are out there living your mission?
So the feedback that I get is it humbles me, to be honest. People have, I get messages all of the time of people saying, thank you for sharing that, because I lost my husband. I lost my mom to suicide, and nobody understood what it was like. I've just it's really incredibly humbling for people to say, I learned something about your journey, which helped me with mine. And that's really what it's all about. And I've just had so many people that have said, thank you for opening that door for us to talk about mental health. Thank you for opening that door for me to be able to free myself from the guilt of my loved one's suicide. And it's just been, it's been the most rewarding part of my journey so far, besides my children.
Yeah. And just maybe before we get to the end of the conversation, where is the future? Where do you see, not the end of your journey in terms of the mission, but where are we headed in your opinion? Like where is the best case scenario that you are working towards?
For me, the best case scenario would be that we normalize and take the stigma off of mental health disorders, and that we truly embrace the need to take care of the mind, because that's what it's about. And that no one would have to struggle and suffer like my husband did with such depression, such anxiety, and that we support people in their health journey, so that their mental health is not something that causes them to end their life. And and that helps people. Like, the ripple of that is, if it's not if it's not shame for you to have mental health problems, that means you can get help. It also means that we acknowledge it as an illness, so that, like, my children don't have to feel like there's something wrong with them because their dad had a mental health problem. Because people even don't share about people in their family because they feel like that people think they're from a crazy family or whatever. And so I just think normalizing it frees up not only the person who is suffering, but the people who are suffering with them. And also for there to be more research to learn more about how we can treat mental health disorders, because while there's a lot of science, it's a lot of art with the medicine. And, we just need to be able to devote more to that, to give people a life that they feel is meaningful to live, to make the people around them not have to suffer as well. And, and then for people who are grieving, I hope that I am a bit of a ray of light, and that more people share with others their authentic feelings, so that we can have relationships that really bring us together.
I think that's a really beautiful way of saying that, because really, when you feel that you can share, and that you're not being judged, and that you're not meant to feel shame or guilt or any of these feelings, and you can just really say things as they are, call them by name,
Mm-hmm.
then you can be actually really go through the emotions and feel them, and go through the journey that you're meant to go through.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Julianne, for coming here and sharing your story, and for inspiring us, and to allowing us to be part of that mission. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.